The next topic on the agenda is a discussion of coyotes, one of the hot topics in town.
Yes. Mayor, I still remember the first time someone informed me that there was a coyote on the side of the right-of-way on the bypass, and I thought they were crazy. And that was about 2009, and fast forward till today, and it's an issue that's becoming more and more prevalent in the town, and I'm hearing more and more concerns by our citizens about what are we doing, what can we do, and what other opportunities might exist. What the chief is going to talk about, police chief, and he and I have been in discussions about that since 2009 about coyotes, that there are, as you know, some restrictions and some protections that are placed on us, as well as some other issues that we'll discuss. But before he comes up, I wanted to let you know that as a county, the town managers have we get together about once a month, and this is one of the issues that we discuss about a concerted approach of how we might be able to address this together instead of individually, because the one thing that is pretty clear from the wildlife resource officers and the biological assessments is that you have to really subtract a huge amount of coyotes from the population in order to make a difference. And the numbers that are quoted, and Chris Turner with Wildlife Resources presented to the board in, I believe, March of 16, it takes about 70% of the population to be removed in order to have an impact. And that's difficult to do, especially when you don't know exactly how many coyotes we're dealing with. And they can repopulate as necessary. They're very adept at being able to do that. So it's a struggle. And then of course we have the red wolf restriction that's placed on us. But the town managers have discussed this. We all have ordinances against discharging firearms in town. However, in the case of if you're trying to protect yourself, be it against the coyote that's on your property or any other means, any other concern for that matter, you do have the right to protect yourself. We're not aware of anyone from what I understand, there are those that have coyotes that have been shot by private property owners. We're not aware of that happening in town, and he can speak to the number of reports that we've had. But the town managers have talked about the ways that we can maybe approach this collectively. Peter Rasco from Southern Shores has been really involved in speaking with legal counsel for the Wildlife Resources, and of course they're in a holding pattern. They're actually meeting today and tomorrow in Raleigh, and I have spoken with a representative from Senator Tom Tillis's office about Senator Tillis recently introduced into the budget bill legislation that would remove the red wolf protection from the 5 coastal counties. That includes the Outer Banks. And what we've talked about, and even have drafted a letter in your packet of asking Judge Boyle to consider the fact that maybe it's possible to exempt the Outer Banks portion of Dare County from that. Of course, that letter in and of itself may or may not have an impact, but to the thinking. But in order to actually intervene, we'd have to consult with a counselor and get him to act on our behalf to change any substantive language in that bill or in that prohibition. So we are continuing to talk about it. We are continuing to look at things that we can do. We have trapped. We've contracted someone to do some trapping. We've trapped on, with permission of the Outer Banks Tourist Bureau, on that site, which we're doing again now. Trapping season has started. We're also trapping back in Nags Woods at the firing range. We've seen some activity on cameras back there. You know, there are other places that we could trap. It would have to be on town property. We can't trap on private property. The private property owners can do that, and the chief can talk about that process. But there's always a concern of the unintended trapping of a trap set at maybe at town park, and you know, we are concerned and cognizant of that. But it is a difficult thing to approach, and I think, you know, the number one thing we hear from, what is the town doing about it? And I'll ask the chief to update you further.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. The PowerPoint that's provided that Ms. Roberta's pulling up now was presented to this to the Board of Commissioners in March of 2016 by Chris Turner. He's a biologist with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. And preparing for this meeting, I reached out to him to see, one, if he'd be willing to come here to present to you all today, which he was more than willing to do so. But he added, he said, it would be the same thing that I presented in 2016. Nothing has changed. He said he's given a presentation tonight in Southern Shores. It's going to be the presentation that we received in 2016 with a little more biology of the coyote and a little more behavior oriented to his presentation. Chris did commend the town of Nags Head for being forward in getting the information out to our citizens. By having him here in March of 2016 with Roberta doing the public information on our website, having the presentation that was recorded that day being available for people to see, he commended the town for being active in getting the word out. We also, this is our second year of trapping. We let him know about our success last year down at the event site. Again, it's not a lot of numbers, but we can at least show our citizens, look, we are trying to control the population the best we can. When we look at the tools and to prevent and resolve conflicts on the Outer Banks, we are one of the 5 counties that are under an order from the federal courts that limit what we can do to coyotes. In other areas of our state, they can be shot daytime, nighttime. There is no limit on them. There's no season on them. You see one, you shoot them. Here in our area, it's a little bit different. Twofold. One, because of the federal court order by Judge Boyle, but also because of our ordinances in the town of Nags Head that restrict the discharge of firearms. Can you go on to the next slide? And go one more up, please. When you look at managing and directly resolving conflicts, Chris, when he presented to the board, just the fact that someone sees a coyote, in wildlife's opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. Most of the calls that he gets from the Outer Banks are people that have seen them. There are those, and it was widely reported in a news segment by a TV station, that there have been some domestic animals that have been, that has proven that were taken and attacked by a coyote. But he said just most of the calls he gets are just the mere sighting of them. So when you look at what we can do here in our area, hunting, well, hunting here on the Outer Banks, we're very limited on that. When Aaron McCall presented to you during your last meeting, he talked about the licensed hunters that are deer hunting in Nags Head Woods, that they do have the option and the right, if they have the coyote hunting permit from the Wildlife Resources Commission, that while they are deer hunting, they could obviously take a coyote. He said that he was not aware of any being taken, but they do have that right. So hunting here in our area that's kind of going to be difficult, with the exception of Nags Head Woods with the licensed hunters. The other one is trapping by licensed trappers. Much like what we're doing now, we've contracted with a licensed trapper in the state of North Carolina, and we've identified 2 sites that are, there has been coyote activity. We've seen that on cameras that we have in the area, and they're set up in a way that it's going to, the chances of it affecting anyone else is very, very slim. I mean, the places where they're at, our people shouldn't be there anyway. They're just set up in a way that we shouldn't have any conflicts there. Private property owners, whether it's an organization, a homeowners association, whether it's a private property owner in Nags Head Cove, wherever, they have the right to hire a licensed trapper themselves. If they're having problems with a coyote coming onto the property, they have the right to contract with a trapper, and he can set traps on their property. The town cannot hire somebody to go into someone's private property. We can only go on town-owned property or where we can get permission, which is like the event site. The third one is depredation permits. Depredation permits are issued in regards to coyotes. They can only be issued by the Wildlife Resources Commission. Other animals, raccoons, foxes, our animal control officer is a wildlife damage control agent and can issue depredation permits. He is not allowed to do that for coyotes. So if you're having a coyote that is on your property that is causing damage, maybe they've tried to build a den, they're causing property damage, you can contact the Wildlife Resources Commission and they can issue a depredation permit, which will allow the taking of the coyote by means such as trapping, even when it's not trapping season. So that's a way. Can we go on? When we talked about the regulated hunting, you can see there in other areas, there's no closed season, there's no bag limits. And obviously, Chris Turner with Wildlife did notice that there's limited opportunities to do that here. In the 5-county area, the restrictions that were placed on us by the federal courts is that hunting permit is required. It is free of charge. You just have to have a hunting license issued by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. They do restrict the times at which you can hunt, 1/2 hour after sunset and 1/2 hour before sunrise. And then you must report your kill to the Wildlife Resources Commission. Next one. You can go on to the other one too, please. Again, this is the recreational trapping, which I've talked about. Trapping season for our area of the state is December through February. Friday, I guess it was Friday, December 1st, the person we contracted with started that day. So we're trying to take full advantage of the season and as much as that we can. Site specific, you know, we talked about that. We can't identify the sites. Again, if it's a homeowners association, they may want to contract with a trapper to go in and do something on the common property. Individual property owners can do it the same way. Of course, recreational trapping is about the same thing. Can you go to the next one, please? This is the depredation permits that I was mentioning to you. Again, it can only be issued by Wildlife Resources Commission, and it has to be to individual landowners that are suffering property damage on their property. When they talk about second party permits, what that means is just that the homeowner is being issued the depredation permit, but it can also be in the name of the licensed trapper that can go in and trap on that property. Next one. And again, that's just talked about the 5-county area, how we are limited by the judge's order. I reached out to the Wildlife Enforcement Agency. I was referred to an attorney, just trying to get her opinion on where we stand. You're familiar with what the manager said about the bill that's before the Senate and about possibly doing away with the red wolf protection and just declare them extinct. But we don't know what the federal court will do. If they do list it, we are still limited in Dare County, Nags said, for what we can do. It doesn't release our people to start hunting because of the discharge of the firearms. Much like the manager said, and I met with the mayor and the mayor pro tem, people have the right to protect themselves on their property from coyotes or anything else for that matter. You just have to do so responsibly, because ultimately, in the manner in which you're trying to protect yourself, you've got to make sure that you don't harm others, whether personally or their property, at the same time. Rabies has come up about coyotes. This is not on the slide, but coyotes from 1990 to 2014, of all rabies cases reported in the state of North Carolina, 14 were related to coyotes. Compare that to 7,000 with raccoons. I think it was 64 was the number from domestic animals. So the chances of a coyote having rabies are very slim. There has been no known attacks in the state, and more importantly in Dare County, and that was a topic that Chris Turner spoke of. Going forward, we get people from January 2014 into November 7th of this year. We've received 65 calls regarding coyotes. Something I mentioned to the mayor and the mayor pro tem. That's a lot of calls, and those are everything from, well, I saw a coyote. I was walking my small dog and there was a coyote following me in the brushy area in the village, to where a resident did see a coyote with a domestic animal carrying it away. So it's kind of wide ranging. We do offer any assistance. We're just not going to tell you if you call about a coyote problem. We're going to go through all this and talk to you about what we can do, what we can't do, and then maybe what they can do, you know, that won't involve us, meaning we can't go in and trap, but look, we can get you names of licensed trappers that can come onto your property. We realize that it's an issue. I would encourage people that if they do have a problem with a coyote, such as a gentleman on the south end of town said every evening when he gets ready to walk his black lab, there's a coyote at the bottom of his steps. He lives, I guess, in a beach box. That's a problem. We talked about that. We gave him some options. So I encourage people that when they are experiencing those problems, certainly call us. If our animal control officer's on duty, you'll get him. If not, you'll get a regular police officer, which we know the information we need to pass on to our citizens.
The thing I'd add is just the other thing the town, I think, can do and has done and will continue to do is to educate the public about how they can protect themselves and not attract coyotes, not have food outside, keep their trash secured, make sure their pets aren't out alone, make sure they have them leashed when they walk, and part of that education, I think, is just reaching out, and when you have concerns, you have questions, let us know. A lot of times we hear things after the fact, and so we need to know up front. And again, the chief mentioned this, but I wanted to just reiterate tonight at the Pitt Center in Southern Shores. Southern Shores is having a public forum from 6 to 7:30. Chris Turner will be there, and I think another biologist from Wildlife Resources will be there. But the public is invited to get more information. So if y'all have any questions or think there's something we should be doing that we aren't and want to see us go in a different direction, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. Questions for Kevin or the town manager or observations? Yes, Commissioner Walters.
A question, actually a couple. You said that we're trapping at the firing range, but don't we have additional property that's managed by the Nature Conservancy? Can they trap on that property? Or is there some arrangement where that would not be a possibility?
Obviously, there is that property. Where we're trapping at now is an area that others are not allowed to be, that it's restricted access to those areas. So we're trying to extremely limit the chances of someone coming along. That the traps that are used, if you stepped in it, it's not going to hurt you. If a dog stepped in it, it's not going to break their leg. I've seen how the device works. It's not, back when I grew up and I did some trapping, it's not the same type of trap. So, but we don't want any interaction with that at all. So the area that we're in is restricted part of Nags Head Woods, if I've answered your question correctly.
But we could maybe discuss with Aaron McCall if there are other areas in the woods.
Where there aren't trails or those
Yeah.
kind of things. Just a curiosity.
Yeah.
I
And
can
then-
certainly reach out to him.
And then once they're trapped,
Uh,
they
they're
trap
not-
and release, or they?
No, they're not allowed to be released by general statute. They have to be euthanized.
Okay, okay.
And let me add one set. There are areas in the western part, west of here, that do accept live coyotes that they use for training dogs and stuff. Our trapper does not do that. He euthanizes. So, but I did want to add that.
Okay, that's fine. And walking your pets is good, but cats don't do that well.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, thank you.
Mayor, if I may add just one last thing.
Yes.
Wildlife Resources Commission website is a great deal of information coexisting with coyotes. Much like the manager said, unsecured trash cans, outside feeding of animals. A coyote is opportunistic, I guess is the word. If he goes and finds food, that's an area that he's going to come back to over and over. But the website offers a lot of great information as well.
And we'll have this presentation on our website. It's an excellent source of information.
Okay, great. Commissioner Fuller, any questions? One observation, I assume by virtue of when people make reports, you indicated that there was some follow-up on that. So does that mean that we would result in a potentially geographic database of where sightings are most frequent or where they're occurring? And I'm wondering, my question would be, if there is a concentration of problems at some point in some area where we may own other town property, like a fire station or a tank facility or something like that, where we might decide to trap based on observation?
Yes, sir. A great question. The complaints that I mentioned, they've been from the south town line all the way to 8th Street.
Right.
From seeing them running on the ocean front to all the way back in Nags Woods along the sound front. I do not believe that there is a specific area where there has been more. But we will explore those locations that you mentioned to see if would be a way that if there's activity in that area where maybe that could be trapped as well.
We have addresses of those 65,
We do.
so we can plot it and see.
Okay, and it may not be a concentration yet, but it may become a concentration at some point that is worthy of further investigation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner Walters, sorry.
Want to go first?
Renee?
Can we talk with Jockey's Ridge State Park? Because I know that, right behind where I live, there is sort of a pack that runs there and beyond and behind North Ridge. And I didn't know if maybe they have data or if there's any possible partnership there.
Yes, ma'am. I'll reach out to the superintendent.
Thank you.
Okay, Renee.
That's funny, we were on the same track, just different agencies. I was wondering if we've had any conversation with the National Park Service about the possibility of using the power line easement to work in conjunction with the Park Service to do some capture. I don't know what the Park Service policy is, I'm not presuming that I know, but if there's any potential, since that covers such an area of South Nags Head.
I can certainly reach out to their chief ranger and see. Thank you for the suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda includes items